Okay, so good evening. So today we're going to be looking at activity life cycle and intents, right? Just following up from the last class. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to look at today. So what we're going to be covering is we're going to talk about the concepts of activities, and their life cycle in Android. And we're also going to, look at creating multiple activities and how you can navigate between them using intents, right? Meaning that we're going to learn about what intents are and how to make use of them. Okay, and then of course we'll look at the different types of intents that we have in Android as much as we can, right? So that's that. So that's basically what we're going to cover. So let's just do some theory explanations, right, before we get into writing code, right? So basically, an activity, as you can see, is a fundamental component of your application that basically represents a single user-focused towards interaction, right? A single user-focused interaction. So when you open your application, that particular screen, that particular UI that you're focused on, right? That is what an activity. So it is used to present the user interface of an application and then to handle user interactions, right? So when the user clicks on this button, right, what happens? The user attempts to scroll. When the user presses and hold, what happens, right? So the activity presents the user interface, mean that your UI is actually designed on your XML, right? So, but the activity now presents that UI, right, and then handle whatever interaction that the user is going to have with that UI, right? So that's basically what an activity is, right? Just it's a single user focused towards interaction. It represents just that you know um, aspect of the application. So that's basically that. Now, talking about activity lifecycle, right? Now, activities, right? They are basically, remember, like I said, they're responsible for presenting the user interface, right, and handling user interactions. But the thing is this, you need to understand the activity lifecycle because that helps you to manage the state and behavior of your application. Now, when we talk about lifecycle, the train is these are things you do every day with your Android applications, right? For some of you that have Android, in fact, your mobile phones, basically, whether Android or iOS, you actually minimize, right? Okay, you minimize an application, open another one. You probably go to the home screen, open it back. You sometimes you kill your application by probably where you minimize and then you just swipe, probably depends on your phone. You swipe up, right? You can actually close or kill that application. Now, all these things are your activity goes through a life cycle, different stages, right? All those are states. There are different states of your application. At the point where you can actually see interact with the application, the point where you cannot interact with it because probably you minimized it, it's at the background. They are all states, and we're going to look at that. So your activity life cycle is basically just the series of states and transition that your activity goes through during its life or time, from when it is created to when it is actually what's destroyed. Okay, so let's look at a few of them, right? If not all of them. So these are the life cycle methods for an activity. Okay, so I'm just going to explain every one of them, but we'll actually implement it. We'll just do practical stuff, right? Now, the first one is the onCreate. So this onCreate, it's actually a method, right? You can see the parentheses, so that shows it's a method. So this onCreate method, right, is called when the activity is first created. So at the very first time you, let's say you just downloaded an application, right? And you click on the icon, okay? That very first time, okay? The method that is being called is the onCreateWhat method. So this method is called when the activity is first created, okay? So this is when it is in this method you can perform some one-time initialization. Maybe you want to set up, just like setting up the UI using there's a method called set content view. We're going to actually see get to look at that, right? It's in this method you can initialize your variables, right? Or maybe anything, any state, or anyhow you want your application to behave, right? When it is just opened for the very first time, when it is created, you understand? Or after it has been killed, when it is created, right? Anyhow you want your application to, behave, it is in this method you write that logic, okay? So the next one we have is the onStart. So the onStart is called, it's a method also. So it's called when the activity becomes visible to the user, but isn't yet in the foreground. Okay, so the activity is visible to the user, but it is not yet, in the foreground, right? So a typical example is, when you click on, let's say you open your WhatsApp, right? Yes, you are seeing there's just a point where you're actually seeing the chat screen, but you cannot just maybe open your WhatsApp and immediately you click and start typing. No, there has to be like a split, maybe 1 second or some milliseconds, right? More like it's trying to load. You're seeing it, actually it is visible. That UI is visible, but it's not in the foreground yet. You're not able to interact with it. Okay, so it's in this method that you can actually do stuff like registering what we call broadcast receivers and monitoring sensors. We'll brush through all those stuff towards the end. Okay, so and the next method after the onStart is the onResume. So this particular method is called when the activity is about to become interactive with the user. So at this point, the activity is actually in the foreground and it's ready to receive user input. So you can actually now probably click on that chat, you can send that message and do all of those, right? So it is at this point, right, that you can become that the onResume is called. So it is now in the foreground. It's ready to receive any user input. So you can actually have animations here, music playback, and some other things you want to actually do in your onResume method. Now, of course, we have the what's it called, the onPause. So the onPause there is called when the activity is partially obscured by another activity, but it's still visible. So when you probably press your minimize button, there's you kind of have a way of, at that split second, right, you're seeing it. Okay, you're seeing the application even as it's going to the background, and something else or another page is kind of taking over, right? That's the method that is called here, is the onPause. So another example is when you have a dialog pop up, right? Probably you're on your maybe you're trying to sign up, right? And then when you click on sign up, a modal or a dialog pops up to ask you, are you sure? So you're actually still seeing, you kind of still have a view of the sign up page, but the modal is kind of prevalent. That's what is like, kind of an overlay. It's just obscuring the sign up screen, right? So that is, at that point, it means that your sign up activity, right, that particular UI is in the onPause state, because it is not in the foreground. Anything that's in the foreground means it can be, interaction can take place. Okay, then of course the onStop. So this onStop is called when the activity is no longer visible to the user at all. When the activity is no longer visible to the user, so probably maybe the user has navigated to another activity, or probably he has closed the application, right? So there's a lot of things can actually make it get to the onStop. Now, of course, we have the onDestroy, right? So this one happens when the user has finished, the user finished the activity by, probably just, when you minimize, you just swipe up or you just close the application, right? So at this point, you should release any resources that you're actually, making use of to kind of free up your memory, right? We'll get to actually implement these things. And then, of course, this other phase, right? The recreation phase, right? This one happens when there is configuration changes, and the configuration changes I'm talking about is, when you switch from probably portrait to landscape, right, on your phone or your application. So at that point where it switches, right, Android may actually destroy the activity and recreate it, right? So in such cases, we'll get to learn to use some methods to probably save important data, because when you change your configuration, Android kills that activity and recreates it. So if there's any data that was there at the portrait mode, you probably may not see it in the landscape. So that's where you basically have to save We should also see it in a portrait mode, right? So it's actually very important that you handle these transitions properly, maybe from create to start. The transition should actually be smooth, right? The transition should actually be smooth. So we're going to we'll implement all these things. Okay, so then that takes us to intents, right? Before we actually get into the coding, right? So let's talk about intents. So basically, intents are it's just a concept in Android that facilitates communication between different components of your application, of your Android application, right? And also between different Android applications, right? That's basically what intent is. So it's just a way to facilitate communication, to pass information, to communicate, two components in an application communicating, or two different Android, maybe the same app but on different Android phones also communicating, right? That's basically what intent is about, right? So they are basically a way to request an action to be performed, so to initiate various Android system activities. Now, we actually use them for various things, right? You can use intents to start an activity, right? You can use it for services, broadcasting messages, there's notification and stuff like that, and to pass data between components. So there are basically two primary types of intents that we're going to be looking at, right? There are basically two types that we're going to be looking at. So the first one is what we call the explicit intent. Now, the explicit intent, you use it to start a specific component within your application, right? Within your application. So you use it to start a specific component within your application. And we also do that by specifying that target component's class name. So where do you want to go to? And what information do you want to pass? Okay, fine. So you can see it from this screenshot here, right? Basically, what we're doing, we are creating an intent here to move. Look at, we are from the comments, we are in main activity, but we are creating an intent to move to where the second activity. So what do? You start a component, right, by calling the target component's class name. So it's the second activity, that's the component we are targeting in that same application. So we call the class name, right, which by convention is whatever your activity name, : class.java. That's just by convention, right? So that's basically what the explicit intent is about. We're going to test run that. And then, of course, but another thing I want to talk about, right now, if you notice something here, when we created, of course, we've learned about objects and classes, right? So basically what we did is to create an object, which is just like you're assigning a variable. And then this intent is a class. So your predefined class. So we want to create an instance of the class, intent class, and then use that instance to start the activity. So what we want to do here, basically this code is to move to a new activity from one activity to another. But you can see that part of it takes two parameters here. It's taking two parameters here. The second parameter is the target, where you want to go to. The first parameter is what we'll call this. So this, I want to say this, but actually that's what it is. But let me say this. This parameter that you're seeing here, right, refers to the current context. Okay, it refers to the current context. Now let me explain what context is. I had to do this, right, because it's important you know this, so that when you see it, you're not it doesn't surprise you. So in Android, right, context it just represents the current state of your application, or the environment in which your application is actually running. Okay, that's basically what context is about. It represents the current state of your application or environment in which your Android app is running. And what it basically does is that it helps you to do a lot of things. Like you can actually which I've actually listed, right? So from assessing resources and the like. So basically what context is just an instance of the context class, right? It's just we are going there's a context class, so you just basically get an instance of it, right? And oftentimes it is passed as a parameter to either a method, to constructors within your Android components, like your activities, right? And even in views, right? So, but let's look at this, right? The what you actually use context for. So the first one is that you can use your context, the context object, to access resources. So context allows you to access resources like strings, like layouts, like colors, like drawables from your application's resource what directory. Remember, you have a resource directory. So context can help you to access those resources, your strings, your layouts, your colors, drawables, and and all. Of course, we also use context to start activities, which we're going to do soon, right? So you need context to create and to start new what activities, maybe services or broadcast intents, right? We also use it to assess system what services. So all these things you actually see it once we actually start, right? Use it to assess system what services, right? Example of system services are location, like your location, right? Assess location, sensor data, connectivity, and a lot of them, right? Of course, we also use it to assess shared preferences. We'll learn about shared preferences, right? Look at it. It's also used to inflate layouts, right? So, because when you're inflating your views programmatically, you need context to create those objects from the XML layouts that you designed, right? And you're going to see that in code. Okay, we also use it to access files and directories, right? You can use your context to access, app-specific directories and files in your internal storage. It could be a picture, it could be a contact or whatever, right? And of course, we use context to display dialogues, right? To display dialogues, toasts, notifications, right? And then, of course, the last one, you use it to access application information. You can actually use it to get your package name of your application, the version, the resources, basically any information you would want to actually get. Okay. So that's just me explaining context, because we use it you use it a lot, right? Now, but the second type of intent, before we get into coding, is what is the implicit intent, right? So the implicit intent, we use it when you want the Android system to determine which component should handle a request based on the intent action or data or category. So in the explicit intent, right, you're the one who tells the system where to go. Okay, head to this place and do this, right? But in implicit intent, you just state your request, and the Android system will now determine which of the components should handle that request, which is based, and that's going to be based on the action of that intent or the data or the category, right? So we're going to see this because we'll actually practicalize it, because it's even part of your part of your task, right? It's actually part of your task. Okay, so that's basically I think that should be that for slide. So let's just get started. Let's do some hands-on stuff, right? Let's do some hands-on stuff. Okay, so just share my Android Studio quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly join with my phone, so we can actually just do some testing, just like we did the last time, right? So okay, so we worked on something the last time, right? So let's continue. So we're talking about activities, right? We're talking about activities. So let's see, how can we create multiple activities, right? How can we create multiple activities? So let's get right to it. So first of all, remember the here, this is where we actually did our UI, right? This is where we did our design, our layout. We designed our layout, right? And how it would look. So, but we're not going to use this for now. So I'm just going to close this out. Just close this out. Okay. And close this out. Okay. So for now, okay. So remember we talked about activities, right? So this is an activity. So just like, so this is the default activity that comes up when you actually create your Android application, right? And then it's just like your main function, right? Your fun main in Kotlin when we are learning the language, right? That's the entry point. So that's where you can create your class somewhere else, create other functions, but you must call it in the main function. So same thing, right? The main activity is the entry point, which you can change, right? And the reason it is the entry point, like I said the last time, is because in our manifest file, which we have explained what the manifest file is all about, it has this intent filter. Well, I just talked about intent, which is you basically giving an instruction. Okay, hey, do this. Is that you tell it to do this and tell it where to do it, or you just give it a request and the system will figure out what component to handle that. So one of the actions in this intent here is the main action, right? And it's under the launcher category. So any of your activity that has this, it means that when your app is being run, it will go to that activity. Okay, so that's that. So let's go back here. So you can, if you look at this code, right? Looking at this code, so let me see if I can. Let me see if I can increase this text a bit to maybe something bigger. Um, okay, so let's see if I make it 20. I hope it's going to be okay. Okay, so I think this is big enough, right? Okay, so so you can see we have a class called what's being activity, and it extends the app activity what class. So of course we have learned about inheritance, right? So it shouldn't be new to you, right? So it extending this class means it has access, it has access to the methods and parameters and everything. So if I want to check out what is in this class, right, you can double click and do Control B, or you just hold your control, and when you get here, you now click on it. So whichever one. So you can see the app compact activity class that's already been defined and set for you with a lot of things that you can actually, a lot of functions that you can make use of. So you can see set content view, and a lot of things. So you can actually even see the on stop. You can see our on start, like we talked about. We talked about the states. You can see that we have on post resume, we have on resume, all of them, they are here. So these have already been defined for us, right? And you can see it is in Java. Remember what we talked about Kotlin, it's actually built on, it's interoperable with Java. Okay, so because it's extending the app compact activity, it now gives us access to override this onCreate function, because there's an onCreate function in the app compact activity, right? If I just do a Control F, right? So we have onCreate function. So let me search for it. I'm just clicking to one. Okay, so we have an onCreate function that it's actually going to extend. So okay, so delegates.onCreate. So you don't need to bother yourself with all this though. I just wanted to show you that we have stuff here. So so we now override the onCreate function, right? Now, in the onCreate function, it takes a parameter called save instance states and returns a bundle. This we'll talk about it later. I want to talk about configuration changes, right? But it's with this that you can actually save certain information. You can save certain data when you want to, when you have a configuration change, right? You can just change, save some data. So and then of course you have this super.onCreate, right? Of course, we have done in inheritance, so this super shouldn't be an issue. And then but we have this method called set content view. So what does this set content view mean? So just take it in the literal sense, right? Just from the word set content view. So it sets the view of that content. So you can see where it was defined here. What does it take? It takes a layout resource ID. So that means you have to give it the ID of a layout, right? So which is why, since that is a parameter, what layout do we want to set? So remember, we talked about activities, right? It basically just, it gets the view and displays it to the user. So how do we get that view? And what view exactly? What layouts do we want to set, the view of that content? So it's the activity main. And where's the activity main? It is in resource, which is R, which we have, and then we have layouts, and then we have activity main. So this is just like a path to the main the file we want. So you can't just write because the name of the file you want is activity main, you just come and write activity main. No, where is activity main? You need to give it a path to where it is, right? So that's why we have that. Okay, so everything we're going to do well for now is going to be done inside the onCreate, except when we want to create a function and a class. But when you do it in onCreate, remember in the onCreate, that's actually the first method that's called when you create the application, right? Okay, so now how do we create? So you can create multiple activities, right? So how do you create another activity? So I'm just going to come here where I have my package name, this app dot this my application, right? So you don't, this is not the second one. When you want to run test, you get to use them when you want to run test. So we're not running. I'm going to right click. At any point you can't hear me, let me know. I'm going to right click, then down you can see activity. So I want to create a new activity. So I'm going to create an empty activity, empty views activity. So there's no views there. Then I'll rename it. So I'm just going to call mine second activity. And then I'll leave this as it is. So it generates a layout file for me, just like when we opened when we created this project. We had the main activity and it generated an activity layout, activity underscore main layout. So leave this checked. Now you see here, when creating an activity, you can decide if you want it to be the launcher activity, meaning that you want it to actually, when the app opens, this activity is what you want it to show first. But of course, we don't want that. Let it stay in the main. So you confirm your package name and then confirm your source language, and then you're done. You just click on finish. Well, this is just it's just network stuff. So this is our second activity, right? You're going to just allow it to build, but this is our second activity, right? So you can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 activities. And when creating the activity, we also created the file, the layout file, which is where we're going to design our UI. So I'm going to go inside that file. So I'll just control and then click on it. So as you can see, it's empty, right? Because we don't have anything here. So but I want to put something there. So let me just, I don't want to start designing anything new. So I'm just going to copy what I have here and paste it here, and then probably delete a few things. Or make it look a bit different, right? So I'll probably, by the size, let's say 200 dp. Okay. Probably I'll just change this text from welcome to KodeCamp to you are in page 2, or okay, let's just say this is the second activity. This is the second activity. Okay, yeah. So let me, then this button, just going to the text, I'm just going to say go back. Just going to say go back. Okay, so I think this is fine, right? This is fine. But I can actually use something else. Let me use another image. So it's kind of just the two activities just feels different. I think I have something atom logo here. So let me just change that to this. Okay, good. So, so that they are both different. Okay. Okay, so now we have two activities, but when we run this application, we're only going to see the main activity. We're only going to see the UI of the layout of the main activity. But I want to be able to also go to the next one. So this is where we now start talking about user interactions, right? Being able to click on something and it actually does something, right? So now I'm going to go back to this. So this first of all, I'm going to say this, right? For you to be able to interact with someone, right, properly, you need to know the person's identity, right? You need to at least know the person's name. So that's the same principle here. So for us to be able to interact with, whatever, to be able to interact with this layout or whatever, we need to first of all give it an ID. So you need to confirm that your elements, your views have an ID. Only the ones you're going to interact with. If you're not going to interact with them, with any other element, you don't necessarily need to give it an ID. Okay. So in my activity main, so I'm going to change this button. I'm going to change the name. The name there. Instead of saying login, let's just change that to go to second activity. Okay, so let's just use that. So what do I want to do? I want to be able to click on this button, right? I want to be able to click on this button. And then when I click on this button, it should take me to this second activity. Remember, your activity actually, just by this code, your activity already presents the UI, right? So I want to go from this activity, the main activity, to the second activity. So first of all, like I said, we need to confirm that we have an ID. So in our activity main, right? In our activity main, so we have this button. The name is button. So we can change the name to what name do we use? I don't know. Let's just say button one. Okay, let's just say button one, button underscore one, right? And then this other one, I'm going to call it, since it's back, go back. I can just say back underscore button. Okay. I hope we don't have another back underscore button somewhere. Okay, so that's that, right? Okay, so let's go back to the main activity. So how can we, move? So like I said, so now we have given it an ID, right? We now need to access that ID. Okay. Well, so just think. So this is how I like to think of this thing, right? So think of it like you just get a house help. You say you need a house help in your house, right? So you go to somewhere, wherever, and then they tell you, okay, fine, we have somebody. That person is our layout. And already the person has an identity. So let's say the person's identity here in our activity main, the name of the person is button one. That's the name of the house help. Now, but you need to be able to, before you can get button one being your house help to do something. Number one, you should actually know her name, his or her name, right? And you should be able to call his or her name. Now, but at the same time, sometimes you forget. So that's why humans, we memorize things, right? You need to be able to remember the name of your house help, right? Before you can call the house help. Is that not so? So for you to be able to remember it means you need to also store it. So a lot of these things, right? We need to understand that coding and all these things, it's we are teaching the computer to do things. that we know how to do, but it does it faster and more efficiently. Okay, so do you have a question before I move on?
No.
Okay.
No question.
Okay. All right, let's move on. So now, so because I want to remember, right? I want to always remember the name of this button. I want to always remember it. So what do? I'm going to create a variable and store the name. So whenever I need it, I'll just call that variable. Okay. So I'm going to use a val and I'm going to say, what's the name? I'll say button underscore, or let's use camel casing, right? Button one. Now, this variable, what type of variable is this? You need to actually specify. So just think about it. Think of it where you're creating a variable, declaring and assigning, right? So here you can decide to declare the data type at the left or at the right. So I could say this variable is of type what? What type of variable object am I creating? So this is what I'm working on, the button. So it's a button, right? It's a button. So I'm just going to come here and say, okay, this is of type what? Button, right? And then allow it. So try to always type out things, right? Once you see what you need, enter. So I'm going to say, and then the method I'm going to use called find view by ID. This method has already been written. So just as the name implies, it finds the view you're looking for using its what? ID, right? So that is find this view by its ID. So use the ID of this view, right, to find the view for me. So how do I get the ID? And you can see from here, method takes in an ID. So which ID do we want, right? This is the ID we want. We want this button one. This is what we want, right? The ID of this button, the identifier, the name. So how do I get it? I'll use, say, R, which is short for resources, R dot, and then ID dot, and then the name of the ID I'm looking for, which is what? Button one, right? So that's how I get the what. So what this line does is what gets the of our button and stores it. So if we ever need to call that button, all we just need to do is call this what object or this variable, right? Okay, so that's that. Now you've called it. You've called the house help, right? Now your house help has, and I'm sure you're not going to get the house help that is deaf and dumb, right? You get the house help that has ears, that can listen, right? So when you get the house help, one of the things that your house help is always going to be alert for is her name. So he or she, your house help, is ready to hear his or her name, so that the house help can actually answer and do whatever task, because that's what they are actually brought to do. So it means that your house help, her ears should, his or her, right? I'm trying to use his or her so that people you don't get to say, oh, does it mean that house help must be a female? No, please. But I have to use something. So your house help must have a listening ear to be able to hear when he or she is being called, right? So let's apply that in code right now. So what am I going to do? So I'm now going to use a method. So I'm going to say button one, which is the button. I'm going to do dot. So the button class has a method, or every view has a method called set on click listener. Now I'll use the second one that has this lambda function. I'll use this second one, right? Okay, so what does this do? This line that we just did now, all I have just done is give your house help, give this button a listening ear, so that it listens for what? And a click. It listens for when the user will click, just like your house help listens. His or her ears is actually working, waiting to receive a command, or just waiting for somebody to just say the name. Once you just say house help, whatever the name of the house help is, the person appears. So the ears are always what? Alert. So that's what we just did to this button. We gave it a listening ear. So we gave it a listener. That's why we say set an on-click listener. Now there are a lot of listeners that we'll use, but this particular listener is listening for a click when a user will press that button. So inside of this curly brace, that is where we'll now pass in the instruction. What should happen when the user clicks on this button? Okay. So I'm going to teach you two things because I'm not going to I think your task I told you to do put up a toast message. Did I? Did I? Not sure. Well, okay, maybe I'll just do it. You can apply that. Okay. So I'm going to do two things. A toast message. So a toast message is basically just a message that, just like a prompt that just pops up at the bottom of your application, right? Just more like to signal the user that something has happened or stuff. So the shortcut, right? Instead of writing all this long thing, right? You can just do it a small letter toast. It is a shortcut to create a new toast for you. So a toast message. Now your toast message, what it takes first, right, is a context. So we're going to pass in a context. We've talked about context. So so I'm just going to say this, right? So that represents to the main activity. And then a text. What should I display to the user when this button is clicked? I'll just say button clicked. And then here is just you determining the duration. So this is toast.length was short. So it shows it for a short period of time, right? And then you call this .show method, right? This now actually displays the toast. But this is not what we want to do. I want to create an intent. I want to click on this button and it should take me to another activity. Okay, it should take me to another activity. That's what I actually want. Okay, so how do we do that? So first of all, I'm going to create an intent object. Okay, val intent, and then I'm going to call the intent class. So the intent class takes some parameters, right? It takes some parameters. So it has about 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah, construct. So I'm going to pass in this as the context, and then the destination, right? So the destination, I want it to take me to the second activity. So I'm going to say second activity. So by convention, we'll just say class.java. This is just a convention. So after that, I will now there's a method called start activity. Start activity, which is this one. And you can see it takes in an intent as a parameter, right? So I'm just going to click on that and then pass in intent. Okay, so that's basically what this is going to do, right? This is just going to so this will actually send, when we click on it, it takes us to the next screen. Yeah. So, but I also want to do, the same thing, right? I want to do the same thing from the second activity, right? This is the UI for the second activity, right? So I also want to go back to the first activity. So we'll still use intent, right? But I'm not going to type things from scratch. So let me just copy and then we'll make a few changes. Okay, so I'm just going to paste that. So what's the name of in our second activity is called back button, right? So let's change that. So I'm going to say back button, which is of type button, and then this is r.id.back button, right? And then this becomes back button.set on click listener. And then same thing, but here we're going back to the main activity. And that's that, right? Yeah, that's that. Okay, so that's basically that. So let's test this out, right? So I have let me share my hold on, let me just bring up my device so we can. So I'm just going to click on this to run it, and then we get to see how see the interaction. So it's running, installing, and then get to see. Okay, so launched. So okay, so this is our main activity. So when we click on go to second activity, which I'm doing now, so you can see it goes to the next activity and it gives us that toast message, short one that says button click. So let's try clicking on this to go back. You can see button clicked also. So you can see that's actually how you change, go from one activity to another. Okay, very easy and seamless, right? Okay, so of course with time we get to improve on a lot of things, but we'll just take it slow and steady, right? Take it slow and steady. Okay, so yeah, that's actually that. So but there are other types of intents, right? There are other types of intent which you actually have to figure out yourself. Yes, you actually figure it out yourself. But let me see. Maybe I should just even okay, let's just do one, right? So let me switch to my code quickly. Let me switch to my code. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let me see which intent should I do. Okay, so let's just check out how to open a URL. Sorry, okay, let me do a share intent. Let's do a share intent, right? Let's do a share intent. So how do we, like, maybe you want to share your application, you want to share a message, right? How do we actually do that? Let's do it from the what's it called? The and the main activity. So I'm going to need an icon for that. So so this is me showing you how to get an icon, right? So I'm just going to go to drawable, go to new, and then I'm going to go to vector asset. Then I'm going to click on this click art here, right? Click on it and then allow this to load up. Then when it's done loading up, I just want to get an icon, something we can click on to share, to test out the whole share intent, right? So it's kind of loading, so I guess just leave it for a few seconds, right? So basically a share intent is a way to allow your users to share content from your application, other applications or services on their device, right? It's actually very common now. You've shared text, images, links, and all the like. So okay, so this is the default, this is the icon that's widely used. So I'm just going to use that. I'm going to call it IC share. The IC there is short for icon. So you should try to name your things, well. So black color is fine. So next, and then you finish. Okay, so now we have that. So I need an image view, right? So let me get an image view for that, since it's an icon. So I need an image view. Image view. So I'm doing this from a code perspective, right? So the layout width, what do you want the width of it to be, right? I could just say wrap content, right? So let's do wrap content. Remember I explained what wrap content is. Then I'll close this. So there are two ways to close, we call these tags. I think I'll just take time to talk about XML some other time. We call these tags. These are two ways to close it, right? But it's whenever you're using a view that doesn't have a child view, right? Then you don't need to do this. We'll talk about nested views, right? So if inside image view, I want to have another view, then you can actually close your tag like this. Else, just, you just close it this way. Okay. So what do we have? Okay, so here we're using 300. Okay. So now we want to actually give passing the icon. So we have I'm going to use the app src part. Hope I'm getting that right. So as drawable IC share, right, which is where, because that's where it is stored, right, in our drawable folder. So this is it, right? Okay, so we have some constraints issue. I'm just going to click here, click it up and drag it, right? And then it's two. So let's just give it a margin. So since I'm using layout margin, so whatever figure I give is going to do for the top, right? So let me say 24 dB. Okay, so this is fine, right? We just want to implement that feature. But I'm going to introduce you to padding also. Padding just gives you space, within that particular word. So you can see margin gives space from the parent to, the distance between the parent and this, but padding actually just kind of gives it's more like an inner, just think of it as an inner margin. So if I do 24 dp, you can see the padding. So this is the view, but you see the distance from, from the inside between the icon itself and the edge. So this is actually too much. But the essence of padding a lot of times is, when you consider touch, the fact that people click on it, right? So that especially people who have big thumb. So let's just use it. Right? I think it should be fine. Okay, it's fine. So of course, so we want to be able to click on this, right? So we need to give it an ID. So I'm just going to say ID, click enter. When this other one comes out, you click enter. So I'm just going to call it what? Share. Yeah, I'm just going to call it share, right? So just the same way we did it, I'm going to go to my main activity. So first of all, I have to get the ID and store it so I don't forget. So val share button is of type image view, right? It's an image view. Remember the type. It's so same thing. Find this view by its ID. And what is its ID? The ID is what? Share. Okay. So what do we do? Okay. So I think we have an issue somewhere. Okay. So let me just do something like this. So you also need to try as much as possible to not use okay, so still have still shouting, right? So let's find out. This is also another way of what's it called? So where you're saying find view by ID, but what type of view are you looking for? It's this. Okay, so okay, hold on. Here is if you want to get a drawable, right? But we want to get the ID. So probably just yeah, this is it now. So what we're saying, layout activity does not contain a declaration with ID share button. So it's saying this doesn't contain a declaration. So no, this second activity. Okay, so why is it saying it doesn't contain a declaration? Do I need to clean this project? Let's see. So sometimes this thing can happen though. Okay, so type image view. Okay, so wait, why am I calling it? Okay, share button. Okay, so yeah, we're good. Actually correct. So sometimes when you know you're doing things the right way, just kind of go to build, clean your project, and then you're good. So these are two ways of actually storing the ID. So I'm going to leave it like this, any of this, either this one. So here we are explicitly declaring the type. Here we are declaring the type when we want to get the ID. Okay. So how do we now, share, right? How do we now, use the share feature? So first of all, I'm going to create a share intent, right? An intent to share. So I'm going to do a very long process. It can be shortened, right? Even these two lines can actually be one line, right? But let's just go to understand the steps. So first of all, I'm going to this is one thing you should also try to comment. What kind of intent? So there are a lot of intent, right? Intent to show you. So I'm going to create the intent class. Intent. Let me just show you how much of. So when I see dots, so you see there are a lot of actions, right? Remember, intent is an action you want to take, right? There are a lot of actions. Action airplane mode changed. Action all apps, action answer, assist, a lot of things. So this is for call, to check if battery low, battery has been changed, the battery is okay, camera bots, like a lot of things, right? A lot of actions that can be taken. But the one we want, the action send. The one we want to so that we can create that is action send. Right? That's basically what we actually want. The action was sent. So this is us just creating here what's intent. So we're creating that instant, right? So the next thing we're going to do is to type of data you want to share. Very important. Like I said, very short, but let's also break it. So the next thing, set the type of data to be shared. Now, the type of data could be an email, could be a text or whatever, right? So how do we do that? I'm going to use this my instance, right? Share intent. Share intent. Type. So what is the type? So the is so what we want to do is I'll say text / plain. Right? How we do it, right? So the next thing now, add the data. So you now add the data you want to share, right? What do you actually want to share? So the first one is the type of what you want to share. The next, you want to share, right? So what's the data you want to share? You should create a message variable, a variable to store a message, a string. So this is first share intent, right? That's just what we want to do, right? So with that message, I'm now going to use my instance share intent, put extra, right? Put extra. So that's where I now pass in. So the put extra, that's like the message you're passing the data. Use the put extra method. So I say intent dot extra. So we have a lot of things here: extra speak name, extra alarm, extra assist, extra bug report, and a lot of the extra email and stuff. So here, what we want is extra text. Okay, I think the task I gave you is for you use it is to do a mail. I think I remember. So after then and passing the message, right? So just think of this as when you're doing your string templates stuff. So that's actually that. But we're not done. Now, another thing you would want to do, right, which is very important, is to check if there are applications to handle the share intent. Now, this intent we did here, this very first one, right, is an explicit intent. Why? Because we know where we are going to. We know where we want to actually go to, which is second activity. So we told it explicitly, right? Go to the second activity. But for this other one, which is an implicit intent, we don't know, right? We just created a share intent and the action is to send something. What do we want to send? We want to send a text. What's the text? The text is, this is my first share intent, right? So what we now need to do, we can now check if there are applications that is available to handle this intent, right? So we can just check if there are apps to handle share intent. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we'll do an if statement. So we'll say if the share intent dot there's a method called resolve activity, and it takes what we call a packet manager, right? So if this is not equal to null, I believe you can understand, the concept of not equal. If it is not equal to null, right, the meaning that there is actually there's actually an application that can run it. So what this just checks for, right? It's basically to check if there's an application that can handle it. So it is not equal to null, meaning that there is an application. We'll now start that intent. So I'm just going to say start. We'll use the start activity, pass in intent, say intent dot create chooser, and then this takes the target, which is the intent, which is our share intent, and then this is just like an extra message, and you share via. You've seen this a lot, right? But this is how it's done. So, but if there is no application to do that, just right, you can just send a toast, pass in this as a context and say to open no app to carry out this request. Okay, so let's right. So basically what have we done here, right? We created a shared intent, right? Using this intent.action was send. And what this indicates is that we want to send something. Okay, that's what it indicates. It indicates that we want to send something. Now, the next thing we do, we now set the type of data we want to share using this the instance we created, the .type method, right? So this case is a text. So we set it to text underscore plain, which is a plain text. Now is to add the actual data to what using the share intent. That takes an extra text. This is just parameter message. We already created the message here, right? So after that, before you even start to share the intent, you should check. We are basically just checking if there are apps available on that device that can handle it. So have you tried to open a file before and then there's no app that can actually open it, right? So what happens then, right? So if it can handle it, if there's an application that can handle it, right, then we use we share that intent using what we call the resolve activity. Like we just use this resolve activity rather to check, right, if there are applications that are available. If no app is available, what we're doing is to do this toast message, right? But if there's an app available, right, then we share the intent using the start activity intent.create chooser and this. So basically what this does is that this just display a dialogue. That's what this one does, that you're creating a create chooser. It will create a dialogue. It will display a dialogue that allows you to choose how you want to share the content. Do you want to share it via email? Do you want to share it via a messaging app? Do you want to share it via social media app? Whatever, right? Whichever one you want to actually do. Okay, so let's test this out. Good thing I'm using a physical device. So let's test this. Let's test this out. Okay, so I'm going to run this and then just share my Android device. So I'm running that. I've clicked on run already. So let's see. Let's see what we have. Let's see what we have. Let's see if we are able to. Okay. So okay. So I think we have not done something, so it's not actually work. But let it run. Let me show you. So there's something we haven't done, so it won't actually work. So but let's wait a bit. Okay. Okay, so the thing is, well, it's going to work, right? But we didn't actually do it well, because if you notice, we didn't even click on the icon, right? So we just put the code inside in the on create method. So it just ran that code for us, right? But you can see why we have this, right? You can actually see that we have we have this. Okay, so when I click on this share, nothing happens. When I click on the share, nothing happens, right? So let's go to let's go back to our Android Studio. Let's go back to our Android Studio. So we don't want this to just run automatically, and it happened because we just put everything on create, so the code just ran from top to bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do so we have to put an on-click listener, right? So that the button actually listens for a click. So share button dot set on click listener. Okay, set on click listener, the one with the lambda function, right? That's the one we're actually going to make use of. And then I'm just going to take all this, right, and put inside that code so that it only happens when I click on the what button, right? It only happens when I click on the button. Okay, so yeah, I think we can, we can run this now, right? And then it will only happen. So let me quickly share. Let me share my mobile screen. Okay, so let me just run this now, and then let's see the behavior. So it's still running. Okay. Okay, so you can see, so I'm going to click on the share icon now, right? And then you see it pops up. So you can see this is my first intent, right? So that's the what it pops up this what modal. Pops up this modal. You can see this is our first this is my first intent, which is the message we actually want pass, which you can copy, and then of course whatever platform you choose, then it actually sends that to it. So that's actually how you create a share intent, right? So there are a lot of other intents. You can an intent to send an email and the likes, which that of email is part of your task, right? Yes, that is part of your task. So yeah, so I think this is where we're going to kind of call it timeout. So do you have any question before we end the class? Any question? We're all good.
Good evening.
Yes.
Well, my question is not about tonight's class.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about my previous task that I did.
Okay.
I've not been promoted because my score was not sufficient to promote me. So I have edited it or reworked on it. So I don't know if I can be
Okay.
assessed again.
I'll check it out.
All
And
right,
you hope
thank you.
it was working. You've worked
Yeah,
on
it
it and it's
worked.
working
It
as it
worked.
should be.
That's the problem I have. I don't know how it should, but
No,
to the best of my
you're
ability.
getting hold on now. When you run the code,
Yes,
there's
yes,
a response, there's an output that you should expect. So is it giving
okay.
you the expected output?
Yes, I have outputs even from the first time.
No,
The
and
score I had
no,
the first time
okay.
was
I,
actually 73. So, so when I saw it,
yeah,
so I know that
I
something must be
purposely
wrong
removed that
somewhere.
too. Yes,
Yes, I
exactly.
understand too. So I knew something must be wrong somewhere. So I've been looking for what was. In fact, I've reached out to colleagues who appear to be versatile. and they give me a clue, and I've tried to adjust, but I'm still not sure if I've actually answered what was missing the first time. So that's where I'm at a loss.
Okay. Okay, well,
Mm,
that's fine. I'll look into it. I'll
all
look
right.
into it. Just hold on. I'll look into it.
Okay, thank you.